Hi everyone, and welcome back to English for You. I'm Pat.
And I'm Mike.
And we're on day 2 of our article about constructive criticism, which is giving feedback in a way that helps people grow and improve.
That's right. It highlights the positive things as well as suggesting ways for people to improve.
Yeah, it's better than just giving negative feedback, which doesn't really help people get better. And it's also better than only giving positive feedback because then people would never change what they did.
That's right. Now, one way to give good critical feedback or constructive feedback is to give it using the sandwich method. It's an area to improve between two compliments. So basically say something that you liked about what they did, and then you point out some of the problems and how they could fix it, and then you also finish off with some other positive things that you liked, so that way the person doesn't feel attacked.
When giving feedback, you should also focus on language so it's less personal and relates to situations. You're telling them about the work they're doing, not what kind of people they are.
Try to avoid using words like you, things like that. Talk about the work. It needs to improve. You are fine, but it could be improved by, doing some things a little differently. And this shows that you're trying to help the person. You're not trying to attack them personally. You're trying to help them do better work.
All right, now we have some more suggestions coming up in day 2 of our article, including how to receive this feedback as well. So let's read through and learn more.
Reading. Build up, don't beat down. The art of giving constructive criticism. Another important part of giving constructive feedback to people is being specific rather than vague. It's no use just saying, "This report is too long." It's better to say something like, "I suggest that you give fewer examples in the middle of your report. This is not just useful right now, but it's also a piece of good advice that can be applied in the future." To make your feedback more specific, break it down into key areas and give suggestions for ways to improve each one. Here's one last tip for giving feedback. Ask people to assess themselves. They may already have an idea of where their weak spots are. You can then move on to practical ways to get better. It's also important to know how to receive feedback. If someone's trying to help you, don't interrupt them or react angrily. You don't need to accept every suggestion they give you, but avoid turning every piece of advice into a debate. Giving and receiving feedback can be awkward, but these ideas can make it a constructive process.
All right, so we're talking about giving constructive feedback or constructive criticism, as it's sometimes called. And earlier we talked about the sandwich method. You're sort of putting the criticism part between some compliments, so it's a much easier thing for the person to take on board and they don't feel attacked. Now, it's another way that you can make your criticism more constructive and less sort of mean or not so you're attacking the person or they feel like you're attacking them. It says another important part of giving constructive feedback to people is being specific rather than vague. Okay, this is a very good point. If you're specific, you are exact and you're detailed. You're not talking about things in general. You're talking about this thing, and you're being very clear with your language exactly what you are talking about. If you're saying to a person, "I will meet you on Monday, July 3rd at 7:30 in front of exit number 4 of the MRT station," that is being very specific. "I will be wearing a red hat and green shoes." No, that's even too specific. Maybe if you say, "I'll meet you downtown on Monday," that's kind of vague. I'm not sure where and what time, but I know Monday, but that's all I really know. So if you're being specific, you're being very careful with your details and your facts. You're not leaving a lot of questions hanging in the air. Here's an example. "I know we are going to the zoo next Monday, but can you give me a specific time and place for us to meet? It's this big zoo. There's a lot of hours in Monday. I want to be very careful about what time I'm going to meet you."
And the opposite to specific, as Mike has mentioned, is vague. Vague means not specific. You're using terms or leaving out things that make it hard for people to understand and act on what you're saying. There are no details to help. So you say, well, okay, you say my work's not quite good enough. What can I do? I'll just do it better next time.
Yeah, it's not good enough.
It's a little bit vague, isn't it? That's no help to anyone.
Yeah, here's an example from the article. It's no use just saying, this report is too long. Yeah, that's not really a useful thing, or as we say, it's no use. If we say it's no use, it's not useful. It's not something I can actually use in any good way, in any helpful kind of way. It's no use putting on your rain jacket after you're already soaked, after you're already dripping with water. Oh, I'm going to put on my rain jacket now. It's no use. You're already wet. You should put on some dry clothes and then put on a rain jacket. You can't really make it useful after you're already wet. So it's no use. So it's no use just to say something like, I didn't like it. That's not being very specific. That's being way too vague.
Yeah, to follow up on our example of saying your report, your article was too long. I mean, that's a fact, okay,
sure.
But what to do about it?
5 pages too long? 100 pages too long?
How can I make it shorter? Which bits should I take out? So the article points out it's better to say something like, I suggest that you give fewer examples in the middle of your report. So that is a very specific suggestion. Which bit was too long? The middle bit was too long.
Okay, so
why was it too long? There were a few too many examples. You don't need them all. Just use 1 or 2 and then you can stop and move on.
Great. So
that sentence used today's language in focus. So let's take a moment to focus on that. So the pattern we're looking at here is subject 1 demands, recommends, commands that subject 2 should, and then you follow with a verb, should do something, should go somewhere. And this sentence pattern is used to say what someone is ordering or demanding should happen, with subject number 2 doing that thing. It might be, I demand that you stop talking right now. We can use this sentence pattern with less forceful verbs like suggest, ask, and so on. Like, I suggest that you go to the doctor so he can look at your leg. Now, when we make these sentences, we can omit that, and you'll also find pretty much all native speakers omit should. Now, we can turn this sentence into a passive voice construction, and that makes it more about the demand that's being made than the person who is making the demand. When we do this, we use the dummy pronoun it. For example, it is suggested that people experiencing a cough, runny nose, and fever take a COVID-19 test. Again, this is just saying what the suggestion, the advice, the demand, the recommendation, whatever it is, this is what it is. So why would you want to be so specific with your advice like that?
Well, as we learned, this is not just useful right now, but it's also a piece of good advice that can be applied in the future. That's often very true. When we're giving good advice on things like how to write better, it's not just something you could use on this report, on this bit of homework. You can use that for all your writing, both for school, for work, or if you like to do creative writing, for example. And that is very, very helpful advice.
So how can we be more specific? The article explains to make your feedback more specific, break it down into key areas and give suggestions for ways to improve each one. So pretty simple, really. Don't try and give an overall comment on your performance. You go, all right, let's take this area. Let's look at that first. Now let's take this area. Now let's take this area. And that is breaking something down. To break something down is just reducing something into smaller, parts or components, usually to make it easier to explain, easier to understand, easier to act on, and so on. So if you're giving then suggestions, you can make them on a very specific piece of feedback, and then you move on to the next one.
Yeah, and a lot of what we're talking about in this article, both today and yesterday, we're using this word suggestion a lot. Now, it could be, we use it as the verb form, to suggest. When I suggest something, I'm giving you my advice, the thing I think you should do, or the thing I would do if I was in your place. So just like we talk about advise and advice, if you suggest something, what you are saying, your bit of advice, your recommendation is your suggestion, okay? So if I think you should see this movie, you should eat in this restaurant. If you go to that restaurant, you should order this on the menu because it's really good. These are all my suggestions. You can listen to it, you can follow my suggestion, you can choose to ignore it, but basically I'm just giving you my best advice or what I would do in your situation. For example, do you have any suggestions for what Mandy might want for her birthday? You know, if you know this person,
Concert
Mandy.
tickets.
Even better than, wow, okay, what do you have a suggestion for what kind of concert she likes to go to? Don't say Blackpink.
Okay.
I can't get those tickets.
All right, well, we're being specific there with our feedback, aren't we?
Yes, very.
Okay, so here's one last tip for giving feedback. Ask people to assess themselves. Okay, then we'll find out if they really are ready to learn. Let's take a look at this word assess. To assess someone or something is to basically test it, or if you want a fancier word, to evaluate. E-V-A-L-U-A-T-E, evaluate. You are grading it, in other words. You're reviewing a performance, okay, or something, and you're saying, this is what I think. People take tests in school to assess, do the students understand what they've learned? Can they use that knowledge from their classes? It is an assessment. That's the noun form. When you're telling someone to assess themselves, you're saying review your own performance, give yourself feedback. Tell me, do you think you're doing well or not so well, and why? So why might you want to ask somebody, hey, well, how do you think you did?
Well, partly it's to have them look at their work after they've done it, to kind of go back and review it. And also it might lead to, some deeper thoughts from that person. As it says, they may already have an idea of where their weak spots are. It might be something they think, oh, nobody notices this, but they know it's a weak spot for them. So if you ask them to be honest about themselves, then that can definitely be another way of finding a better way of doing things.
Exactly, because then they can talk about it instead of having somebody else tell them, you're not good at this. You say, well, I'm not so good at this. You've moved past the negative part, you've kind of agreed, and as the article says, you can then move on to practical ways to get better. You've admitted that's your weak spot. I kind of go, yeah, that's probably right. We move on. Let's talk about what we can do about it instead of focusing on, okay, this is a weak spot. When you move on to something, you progress to that thing. You take a conversation or a process onto the next stage. You've dealt with one thing, you go to the next thing. And in this case, the next thing is practical suggestions.
Something practical, this adjective, generally means it's something useful, it's something suitable, it's something you can actually use or put into practice, to actually use or put to work in the real world. The opposite might be theoretical. It's an idea, it's a theory, it's something that's interesting to think about or write about or research. But can you actually use it in the real world, right? Traveling at the speed of light is a very interesting theoretical question, but we can actually build rockets that can go that fast. So if we want to go to Mars, we have to build a practical rocket that actually works in the real world, not just something that scientists love to think about. So practical means useful, that you can actually use it. For example, unicycles, those bicycles with just one wheel, are cool, but they aren't really practical for getting around the city.
No.
Kind of dangerous. You can't carry your shopping on it.
Well, you're too busy juggling.
You'd get wet. Where are you going to park it? You can't lock it to anything, so you can just lift it. Anyways, it's not practical. That's why I sold my unicycle, and now I ride a camel.
That's a lot
Much more practical.
Definitely. Okay, so those are all our different ways for how to give feedback to people. But the other person will also need to respond, and it's more likely, especially with you guys at your younger age, you're going to be getting rather than giving feedback for some time, which is why our article says it's also important to know how to receive feedback.
Okay, because sometimes you're not the expert, you're not giving the constructive criticism, you're getting it, and it can be easy to get your feelings hurt, to stop listening to that person, to react in a bad way when someone says, this wasn't very good. You say, hey, what are you talking about? You hurt my feelings, I hate you. No, you don't want to be that person. So, if someone's trying to help you, don't interrupt them or react angrily. Basically, try to control your emotions. Don't interrupt them by saying, hey, but you don't understand, or I disagree, or something like that. Listen to what they're saying calmly. Try to realize it's not personal. They're just trying to make your work better, and that way it'll be much easier for you to take on board that advice you're getting without getting your emotions all involved in it. Let's talk about this word interrupt. Now, to interrupt here, this is a verb and basically means to break in and stop some kind of action or activity that is going on. And we're not stopping it in a planned way. So, for example, if it's a basketball game and it's halftime, that is a normal thing. If it's a basketball game and someone suddenly runs onto the basketball court wearing crazy clothes, that would be someone is interrupting the game. They shouldn't be there. The police might come and take them out of there, or something like that. So if you're doing something and something strange happens or something unexpected happens and it causes you to stop what you're doing, if it's a loud noise that might interrupt you when you're trying to take a nap, if it's a third person who says, hey, I have a question, when you're talking to another person, I'm sorry, you're interrupting our conversation. This is an unexpected thing, breaking in and stopping whatever is going on from continuing. For example, our chess game was interrupted when the food delivery driver rang the doorbell. All right, we knew he was coming, but we didn't know when, so we were in the middle of the game. We were interrupted by the sound of the doorbell. So if that person is giving you good, helpful, constructive criticism or feedback, try not to interrupt, and also don't get emotional. Don't react badly to what they're saying.
We don't want to react angrily. Right. To react is to respond to something. It's your reaction. That's the noun form. They do something, you do something back. They say something, you say something back. You can react well, you can react badly, you can not react at all. For example, we could say Malcolm reacted badly when Ralph said that he didn't like any of the Star Wars movies. He said, how could you? They're classics. They're part of my childhood. You can't say that. I'm going to type bad words at you online.
Whoa, and then he reacted even more badly when he was told the Star Trek movies are actually better.
Well, that's understandable. They're terrible.
Right.
Anyway, so
back to the article.
Back to the article.
It says you don't need to accept every suggestion they give you, but avoid turning every piece of advice into a debate. It's true. If someone's giving you constructive feedback, that's helpful, but it doesn't mean they're always right about everything. If they know a lot, you might want to listen to them a little bit more. If it's just your classmate and they don't have more experience, you can listen to their point of view. Doesn't mean you have to always follow it, but try not to get emotional about it. Try to listen to what people are telling you, because most of the time they're trying to help.
Yeah, what you definitely don't want to do is turn it into an argument.
No.
So instead of looking at, okay, what could you do? What suggestions could improve things? You're going, well, I think you did this. Oh, but you didn't understand what I was doing. Well, but when I looked at it, this is what I thought. You got it wrong. That's an argument.
I hate you.
Yeah, that does not help at all. So the article concludes by saying giving and receiving feedback can be awkward. Okay, not everybody enjoys doing it, but these ideas can make it a constructive process. So we're going back to that same idea again, constructive, building up, improving, trying to get things better. But yeah, this whole process of giving feedback can be awkward, both for the people giving it and the people who are taking it. Something that is awkward is socially uncomfortable, possibly even embarrassing. It's a situation where nobody is quite feeling relaxed. You're just not sure what you're supposed to do. You're maybe trying to guess what you should do next. You're not just, let's sit back and talk and everybody knows what's going on. You're just, I'm not sure what's happening here and I don't feel right about it. Something's not 100% comfortable. For example, you could say, Lyle gave his teacher an awkward smile after he accidentally called her mom. So an awkward smile, like I'm not really smiling happily. I'm just kind of saying, I didn't mean it. Let's move on.
I hope she didn't hear that.
I hope all my classmates didn't hear that. It would be awkward.
That's awkward. Yeah.
Okay, well, hopefully you guys have got something from that article. You've heard our ideas and you can go, oh yeah, that works for me. And maybe something else doesn't work. Don't worry about it. They're just suggestions. And with that in mind, let's go to our For You chat question.
For You chat.
So today's chat question is, has anyone ever given you a great suggestion for improving? Who was it and what did they say?
Oh, that's a good question. I guess some of the suggestions I most remember are ones that I've gotten from other musicians from playing music. I'm not a trained musician. I didn't study music in any way. I taught myself. So basically you'll meet people who might play a different style of music. A lot of them have been playing a lot longer. And they'll give you, things that seem like very simple suggestions. Maybe they didn't like the way you were playing something and said, play it slightly differently. And I found that those things have really helped. There was a piano player I played with many years ago. He was from New Orleans, where they play a very unique style of jazz. And I was playing it a little too fast for him. And he told me to play it a little differently. At first, I didn't even understand what he was saying because I couldn't hear the difference between what I wanted, what I was playing, and what he wanted. But eventually I got it, and to this day, whenever I play that style of music, I still remember that piece of advice, and no one's ever told me to change since then.
Great.
So I think I got it right. But it was largely down to this constructive criticism I got from this piano player.
Cool. Yeah. I do a kind of theatre sometimes with no script. You just make it up as you go along.
Improv, that's
Improv,
called.
indeed.
Yeah.
And one of the teachers I had early on said, you're trying to think of something super clever that will get a big laugh.
Right.
And he said, that's fine sometimes, but sometimes it means you're not in the moment. He said, what I want you to do is just be like a kid. And be excited and just go with the first thing that comes into mind and play with it. Don't try and come up with the ultimate clever, witty idea. Just play and go along with what is going on. So I always try and keep that in mind. Don't overthink and try and be the cleverest person on stage. Just play with it.
Interesting.
So there you go. That is all the time we have. What about you guys? Have you ever gotten a really good suggestion for improving? Who gave it you? What did they say? And that's all the time for us. Thanks for watching. For English for You, I'm Pat.
And I'm Mike.
We'll talk to you again next time. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Vocabulary Review.
Specific. Paul's request was very specific. He said he wanted a chicken sandwich without tomatoes. Suggestion. During my performance review, my manager gave me some suggestions for how I could improve. Practical. In the meeting, the manager asked for practical ways to solve the problem, not crazy ideas. Interrupt. Lisa closed the door to her office. She didn't want others to interrupt her work. React. I hope you don't react badly to this news, but we're closing down the company. Awkward. Fred asked Betty on a date, but she said no. Their conversations have been awkward ever since.
智慧小补帖
Vague. Assess.
以上节目是由活用空中美语制作， 活用空中美语杂志，请洽询全国各大书店。如欲索取试听教材，请来电02-2364-4000 02-2364-4000，或上网查询，网址是 www.english4u.net www.english4u.net